Ben Askren versus Jake Paul. A joke, a stain on the sport of boxing, or quite possibly the most intriguing matchup in all of combat sports right now. The lifelong wrestler in Ben Askren transitioning to easily his weakest combat sports skill set, being boxing and striking, versus the up-and-coming YouTube star who showed off a lot of promise for the sweet science, albeit against two YouTubers and a former NBA star. This all begs the question, who actually has the edge in this fight, and who should you put your money on? That's what we're going to be breaking down today. This is Kiwi MMA, and real quick, if you guys like this content, then please subscribe to the channel below, and make sure to tell me in the comments what your official prediction for this fight is as well. And without further ado, let's get into this. Real quick, if any of you are new here, I've been covering this fight ad nauseum for like the past 3 weeks, so I'll leave descriptions for those breakdowns below that you can watch. With that said, we're going to be breaking down this prediction into 3 parts. The first will be athleticism and natural propensity for boxing. The second part will focus on boxing skill set as we know it. And the third part will focus on just intangibles and X factors that could play a major role in the fight. We'll then finishing up by just talking about how both these guys potentially match up with each other and what my final prediction actually is. So as far as athleticism and natural propensity for boxing, there's a lot to cover here. So here, I'm just going to briefly cover each fighter's physical attributes as it relates to the sport of boxing. And this could of course involve stuff like cardio, power, reach, etc. And we're going to talk about this through a sports-specific boxing lens, of course. So starting with reach, Ben has an average length of about 72 inches, while Jake is about 76 inches. So right off the bat, Jake is going to have an extra 4 inches or so he can choose to stick in the outside and pick at Ben if he so chooses. Now, Askren has been known throughout his career as a pressure fighter who likes to get on the inside and get close so he can use his grappling skills, so I doubt the reach aspect really affects his approach, but just something to note. Now, as for power, Jake is clearly going to have an advantage here. Not saying he's Mike Tyson, but he has been shown to possess pretty good punching form, very fluid and snapping with his punches, actually much better than his brother Logan here. And in his last fight against Nate Robinson, he really started to sit on his punches more, so I think he should have a huge advantage here. Jake in general is definitely the more fast twitch athlete here, as evidenced by his more explosive punches and just movement in general. Now Ben, on the other hand, doesn't possess much punching power at all and has openly admitted so, and that's not to say he hasn't developed this during camp, but if you look at his actual punching form, he doesn't tend to rotate his hips well or turn into his punches. Now that's not to say Ben can't improve on this during his camp, and he has recently showed some pad work where his punching fluidity and snappiness looks much improved in general, but in general I think it's safe to say that Jake possesses more power than Ben. Ben, in general, is the more slow twitch athlete. He's openly admitted this himself. He's a pretty slow starter, but he is known for his sort of grinding approach. So, he might be able to dish out more volume than Jake, but in general, his punching power is going to be much weaker. This also carries over in his speed. Jake is going to be way quicker and faster, again being more explosive and fast twitch, whereas Ben tends to be slower and more plodding. Jake's going to have faster punches, but also faster footwork. Jake's going to show off much more elusive footwork in there than Ben. He's going to be circling out, bouncing in and out. He's going to be able to get in and out of Ben's range a lot quicker. So yeah. Now, with Jake's more explosive fast twitch athleticism, he's going to have to be careful to strategically explode. He can't be exploding too often or else he's going to gas himself out, whereas Ben's just going to have to focus on his volume. Ben has showed to have pretty basic footwork. I mean, he can do the same stuff. He can L-step, he can gallop back, he can circle out. Again, it's just going to be at a much slower pace than Jake. However, there is one area in this fight where I think Ben is going to have a massive physical advantage, and that's going to be the clinch. Now, of course, wrestlers and grapplers in general tend to have very good isometric strength to squeeze and hold on to people. In Ben's case, Robbie Lawler's head or a watermelon. So in the clinch, I think Ben's going to have a serious strength advantage here. Jake has even showed that against Nate Robinson, he was able to be held pretty easily in the clinch. So Ben's going to have a major advantage here. So in general, as far as athleticism, Jake is probably going to be the younger, more athletic fighter in there, so to speak. But that doesn't necessarily mean that Ben won't have his own strengths here to bring to the table. So this all begs the question, who's going to have better cardio in this fight? The more explosive fighter in Jake Paul, or the more slow twitch grinding athlete in Ben Askren? I think it's safe to say Ben Askren's going to have the cardio advantage for a couple of reasons. One is the fact that he's more slow twitch means he's not going to be exploding nearly as much and is going to be relying more on his volume, so it's unlikely he's going to gas unless he really throws a lot of volume in a short period of time. Now, of course, you can be a slow twitch athlete and still gas out. Look at Nate Diaz against Conor McGregor in their second fight. In that 3rd or 4th round, Nate threw a lot of volume in a short period of time, and I think he unloaded almost like a 50-punch combination against McGregor against the cage, and of course, he got tired. Now, this is different from, say, Conor McGregor, who's a very fast twitch athlete, who he can throw, 4, 5, 6, 7 punches in a row, and if he's putting so much power into them and he's exploding, simultaneously back to back to back, well, that's another way to gas out. So it's not to say that being fast twitch means you're more likely to gas out or being slow twitch means you're more likely to last long. It all depends upon how you allocate your energy. It's just two different types of athletic backgrounds which, allow you to allocate energy differently. If you're fast twitch, it's, I guess, more energy quicker. If it's slow twitch, it's less energy but longer typically. There's also a level of experience that comes into play with this and a difference in athletic background. Now, Ben Askren's been an athlete for years. Now, of course, he wasn't a boxer for years, but he's been an MMA fighter for years. He's been through many fight camps. He's gone the distance in MMA, I want to say 5 or 6 times. And regardless of the sport, Ben has the experience to know how to intelligently pace himself, know not how to blow his load, know, how not to get stressed out, not have that adrenaline dump. Jake, in contrast, has never been past the 5th round in a boxing match, and his last 2 fights ended within 2 rounds. And you can even see in Jake's first fight against Deji, now again, this was his first fight, he was very inexperienced, he was only training for 2 months, but at the beginning of that 5th round, Jake is breathing pretty heavy, it looks like to me. And here's the thing, Jake has never really faced any adversity in the boxing ring, and when you're facing adversity, when you're stressed, when someone's putting the pressure on you, that's where you can get tired. That's where the fatigue can set in. That's where the adrenaline dump can take place. It's just a fact, if you're in there and you're more stressed out, because of the pressure an opponent's putting on you, you're more likely to gas out quicker. It's just a physiological basic response. And when you couple that with being the more fast twitch athlete, and maybe you're getting stressed out, maybe you're getting frustrated in the fight, maybe that's when you start throwing shots out there prematurely and blowing your load, maybe throwing too many power hands in a row. That can also play into the cardio aspect, and that could definitely happen to Jake if he gets frustrated. Now, I just want to note, and I still stand by my comments in my last video, I do think there's questions with Ben's cardio as well. I'm not saying Ben's going to gas out. I'm not saying I don't think he doesn't have the cardio advantage. I'm just saying it's a different sport. It's Ben's weakest skill set. I still stand by my words. He's going to have better wrestling and grappling cardio than boxing cardio. That's just his specialty. And if you watch that Demian Maia fight, I'm telling you, he looks pretty tired, or looks like he's getting pretty tired at the beginning of that 3rd round. And that was a fight where he mainly stood up and struck the whole time. But overall, in terms of cardio and endurance, I think Ben's going to have the advantage here, and we're going to have to see how Jake holds up. This is really the biggest question mark for Jake. How long, how far, how fast can Jake go for? Now let's move into each fighter's boxing skills and tendencies. Now this is a tough section to cover here because of course we've never seen Ben Askren in an actual boxing match before, so a lot of what we're going to be going off here is relying on his footage from MMA as well as his boxing sparge footage that he's released. But what can we say about Ben in terms of his boxing skill set that he possesses? Well, from watching him in MMA, Askren is clearly a pressure fighter. In MMA, Askren's game plan was very simple. Plod forward, use feints and punches to set up the clinch or level changes, and once he got contact, he would simply drive for the takedown so he could control you for 5 rounds. Now Ben is adopting this same approach to the boxing match as evidenced by his training footage. Plod forward, throw some shots, clinch up this time, find some punches whether entering the clinch or exiting the clinch, rinse and repeat. And of course, as we've seen, Ben is going to try to push the boundaries of the boxing rule set and make this as dirty of a match as possible. Now, as far as technical points and striking tendencies, what does Ben like to throw? Well, his best punches easily are his rear uppercut, which is probably his most powerful punch, and also his lead right uppercut, which he'll throw by kind of shifting his body into southpaw, and he's really good at landing this punch on the inside of his opponent's guard, or rather right through the guard, while slipping on the outside of their jab. Now, his right rear uppercut is, like I said, his most powerful punch, and he landed this quite a bit against both Demian Maia and Jay Heron, and he typically doesn't really set it up. He just likes to kind of throw it right down the middle, and then he'll just clinch up immediately afterwards. He'll also throw the right overhand, again, a wrestler's favorite. Now, as far as evading punches, Ben's pretty good at ducking under right hands or left hands or just crosses in general, very similar to when he level changed in MMA, and you saw him do this a lot against Demian Maia. His head movement is pretty solid, able to roll under hooks when coming forward well, though he does sometimes slip on the inside against orthodox fighters like we saw in his sparring footage, and this could lead to a counter right hand from Jake if he's not careful. We could say one thing about Ben. Aside from flying knees, he was pretty competent at not getting hit throughout his career in MMA. And as a lifelong MMA athlete and a grappler, he's pretty good at seeing punches coming. He's able to brace for them. He's not going to do what Nate Robinson did. Ben's not going to be running into punches. When Jake lands, Ben is going to see these punches coming, and they're not going to land with the same effect they did against, say, Nate Robinson, who literally ran into them. And his footwork, as I mentioned, is extremely slow and plodding. Ben basically just follows you around for the most part. He doesn't really do a good job at cutting you off. He doesn't really, get into different stances to cut the cage off from you. He knows how to gallop back. He knows how to reset. He can L-step. He can circle out. He's got all the basic things you'd want to see, but he doesn't particularly possess great footwork. With all this said, and I've tried to highlight the more positive elements to Ben Askren's technical boxing skill set, A quick peruse of his skills just shows that he does not possess a lot of the fundamentals. He rarely keeps his hands up, he doesn't try to dip away or exit after throwing punches. Most of the time he punches, he will just clinch up immediately, and that's his main defense. He does have an incredible chin, and I think he'll be able to take Jake's shots pretty well, but his defense is for the most part almost non-existent. You'll often see Ben throw a right hand, and he just completely drops it after throwing the punch, and that could lead to a major counter from Jake. Now, what can we say about Jake's boxing? Well, Jake, no matter what people think of him, does possess solid boxing fundamentals for someone who's only been training for about 3 years. Of course, this is very relative, and if we were, say, to compare him to, an amateur boxer who's been in the game for 5-6 years, of course he's going to be subpar compared to them. But for what he is, given his more brief period of training time, he's solid. He possesses solid boxing footwork and movement, he knows how to circle out, he knows how to L-step away, he knows how to gallop backwards, he never crosses his feet, his movement and setups never really seem forced, and he always goes in the direction he wants to go with the correct foot. Like when Jake moves forward, he leads with his left leg, and when Jake goes backwards, he gallops back with his, starting with his right leg. It's very basic, but a lot of people who just start boxing do the opposite. They try to go forward using their right leg first, or go back using their left leg first. His head movement and ability to lean back on punches are solid. One criticism I will give to Jake is his defense. While he has shown the ability to guard up from strikes, one thing I noticed is after he throws a right hand, he will drop his hand after the punch a lot. Very similar to what Askren does, not nearly to the same extent. Like in the very first opening exchange of the Gibb fight, he threw a big right hook and then just dropped both his hands. And Gibb was able to land a little short left hook on the inside, I think. So yeah, he's got to be really careful. Someday he's going to fight an actual counterpuncher, and he would probably get destroyed. He talks about wanting to fight Conor McGregor all the time, but if that ever happened, Conor would just counter the crap out of him all day. So yeah, Jake's defense isn't great, but it's better than Askren's, and I'd say the area he's shown the most promise for is his offense. And again, it's mainly just solid fundamentals. Like, Jake has a pretty solid jab that he'll stick out there. He's got a pretty solid left hook. He was very good at countering Deji with his left hook. But it's his right hand that he's able to generate a lot of power in. In particular, his right overhand and his right hook are easily his best punches. Jake also has a solid ability to feint. He's able to bait out certain reactions by feinting. Now, we have to note, of course, he's getting these reactions at a very low-level competition in fighters, but still, he was able to set up the counter overhand against Nate Robinson by just feinting at him and making him panic. He was able to, set up his left hook counter against Deji's jab by feinting, and then Deji would look to parry, and then Jake would land the left hand over the top. His ring awareness is also pretty solid. Every time he got backed up against Gibb, he knew how to get away, he knew how to circle out, he wouldn't stay stationary against the ropes. Against Deji, the second he got on the ropes, he would clinch up immediately to get it back to the center, so he has pretty decent ring generalship. In general, Jake's style is like a brawling infighter with good countering ability for someone of his, respective experience. Like, the jab is one of the most basic things you're taught in boxing, and Ben doesn't even really set up for that at all. He doesn't use his jab remotely. He just uses his lead hand to paw out, which is, you'd think you'd want to develop your jab so you can set up for your right hands, but Ben doesn't do that. Well, Jake does. It's a fundamental. But yeah, in terms of boxing skill set and tendencies, Jake's going to have a large advantage here over Ben, I'd say. Okay, that leads us to our last section, how these guys match up and what is my actual prediction here. Okay, so here's how I see this matchup going down. Okay, Askren is clearly the pressure fighter here, and his plan is to come after Jake, pressure him, throw some strikes, and try to get in on him and clinch. He's going to try to wear him out, lean on him, get him against the ropes, essentially smother him and just keep coming forward. Ben wants to take Jake to deep waters, okay? He knows Jake has never gone, the distance in a boxing match before. He has questions about Jake's cardio. The longer this fight goes on, the better chances Ben has to win. Now, as I've mentioned about Ben, he doesn't really set things up with his jab at all. And I guarantee the first exchange of the fight, Ben is likely to come forward and throw either a right hand, whether a right uppercut, or a right overhand to close the distance so he can clinch and start to, carry out his game plan. Now, Jake, on the other hand, has two options here. He can either move back and try to counter Ben as he's coming in, or he can try to meet Ben in the middle and fight fire with fire because he knows he has the power advantage. Now, I think, given the Gibb fight, Jake will probably respect Ben somewhat at the beginning and let him come in. And once he gets his timing and finds his counters, that's when Jake is more likely going to sit on his punches and make Ben pay for his recklessness. That's where the rubber meets the road in this fight. Ben is going to come forward and press Jake like he's never been pressed before, and he's going to leave himself exposed in some way. 100% this is going to happen. Jake is likely going to have some counter waiting for him, whether it's the check left hook, whether it's the right overhand, or whatever else. Either Ben gets countered and keeps getting countered until he's eventually TKO'd, because honestly I don't think Jake is knocking him out anyway, or Ben is able to keep taking the shots and walk through these punches to the point where he's able to back Jake up and clinch and potentially find his punches from there. Like I said, Nate Robinson seemed to hold Jake fairly well in the clinch, but Nate also came in recklessly and basically just ran forward into the counters. I believe Ben will be light years better at seeing the punches coming, and he's not running into anything like Jake will. But unfortunately, given his defense, he's going to expose himself. His chin's going to be up in the air. I have no doubt Jake is going to land a counter on him. So it's either Jake is able to elude Ben and keep countering him for 8 rounds without getting tired, because mind you, Ben's going to be coming forward. This pressure could eventually get to Jake and Jake could gas out. Jake could start exploding too much. So that could be a problem. So either Jake's able to do that, or eventually the pressure of Ben just becomes too much, and I don't personally see Ben TKOing or knocking Jake out just because I don't think he possesses the power, but I could see him just wearing on him for the duration of the fight and it could just go to a decision. Because remember, the level of composure Jake is going up against here is unlike anyone that Jake has ever fought before. It doesn't matter that Ben Askren is one of the worst strikers historically in all of MMA. His will to win and his fight IQ and his competitiveness is going to keep him in this fight almost single-handedly. And that goes to my prediction. It's a very hard fight to call with a lot of unknowns. If Ben wins, I believe it'll either be a late TKO, but more likely I think it'll be a decision. If Jake wins, I don't see a knockout, but I could likely see basically Jake just landing bomb after bomb on Ben, and Ben's still in the fight, Ben still has his wits about him, but I could see the ref doing something similar to like what happened with Conor and Floyd, where the ref kind of just stepped in and just, got between them and just called it off just because, he wanted to protect the fighter. But ultimately, my final prediction, and I've gone back and forth on this many times, I was initially going to pick Jake, but after thinking about this, I'm going to go with Ben Askren, and I'm going to go by a decision. I don't think Ben has the punching power to put Jake out. Now, this also really depends on how good Jake's chin is. We don't really know how good Jake's chin is. He doesn't really take in much punishment. He really only took a couple jabs against Deji here and there. So honestly, that's one big, huge unknown. And we also need to factor in here the referee. I don't know what this referee is going to be like. I don't know if how much of Ben's illegal moves are going to get through. If Ben's grabbing the back of the head and is collar tying with Jake and he lands a good uppercut in the middle that maybe does some damage, I don't think it will, but if it does, could we see the ref taking points away? Could we see, Ben getting frustrated from his game plan because he can't lean and wear and grab on to Jake like he'd want to? There's so many unknowns, but at the end of the day, I can't see Jake Paul knocking out Ben Askren. And I can't see Ben Askren finishing Jake Paul. So that leads me to think that this fight is going to a decision, and I think it's more likely that Ben is going to out-decision Jake than Jake is going to get to a decision with Ben. Ben is not getting knocked out. He could be TKO'd, but I think even if he is TKO'd, that will be more on the ref and not so much on Ben. I think Ben will still remain composed amidst eating a lot of shots from Jake. Now, could Ben TKO Jake? Yes, the reverse could happen. I mean, Ben could just keep wearing on him and landing a lot of volume, and the ref could probably step in. I think it's more than likely, though, Ben saying that, he thinks it would be a 7th round TKO. I think a decision is probably more probable. But yeah, I'm going with Ben Askren via decision against Jake Paul. I went back and forth on this a lot. I was initially going to say Jake Paul by 6th round TKO, but yeah, I'm going with Ben Askren. And that's not to say that I don't understand the arguments for Jake. Jake, by all intents and purposes, is the better boxer, but Ben Askren is the better fighter. It's a whole different level of competition that Jake has never faced before. And despite the fact that Ben's in a different sport, despite the fact that it's his weakest skill set, I just think that X factor of his tenacity, his will, his endurance, I think it's going to carry him to victory in this. So that's the breakdown and prediction, guys. Thank you so much for watching. For my next video, I'm likely going to be doing a breakdown of this actual fight coming up on April 17th on Triller Fight Card. You can buy it on pay-per-view. And then after this, things open up a little bit. Obviously, I'm not going to be breaking this fight down anymore because I doubt there's going to be a rematch in the future. So I'll probably get started on either a Logan Paul or a KSI Boxing Explained video. I'll likely just do both, but I think those would be really fun to make. But yeah, we also have the community tab now, so I'll maybe post some polls on there to see what fights you guys maybe want to see broken down in the future. And again, thank you so much for watching. This is Kiwi MMA, over and out.